Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Tuomas Väisänen and I'm a postdoc at Digital Geography Lab, and I'm here talking to you about analyzing dynamic segregation and urban diversity using novel data sources. And just for context, this presentation is kind of highlighting some of the key findings from two PhD theses. So one is from my colleagues, Dr. Kerli Myyrisep's thesis, and then some highlights also from mine. And you might be asking, like, why are segregation and urban diversity important? So just with the example from the HMA, so the Helsinki metropolitan area, just in the past 35 years, the number of languages spoken in the area has increased rapidly. So in 1987, you could describe the metropolitan area as essentially monolingual or bilingual, given the Swedish speakers. But however, in 2019, like, this situation has changed drastically, and it kind of underscores the importance of trying to understand these new emerging social, spatial, and demographic patterns that are emerging in our urban spaces and cities. And you might be wondering, so okay, what is segregation and urban diversity, and how are they different? And they essentially are two different perspectives about the same thing. And segregation there kind of more focuses on the separation of different social groups within a city, whether this separation happens because of income or ethnicity or language or religion or whatever it might be, or whether there's like some historical reasons, like historical neighborhoods populated by a certain population group, and individual and economic reasons as people are making decisions where they want to live and where they can afford to live and so on. And these all kind of create these patterns of segregation, like as the result. And then urban diversity then is kind of more focused on the presence of different social groups within a city, and trying to kind of understand what sort of economic benefits can kind of this diversity bring about, and how it affects social progress in the city and society as a whole, and kind of how it links with cultural richness and kind of this inclusivity. And with this comes the recognition that even with diversity, and especially with increasing diversity, also the potential for conflict increases. So there's definitely a recognition for kind of need for creating urban spaces that are inclusive and kind of foster social cohesion. And by now you might kind of gain a kind of understanding segregation and urban diversity is kind of crucial then for supporting these sustainable and equitable cities. And then you might be asking, okay, then what is this dynamic perspective? Well, traditionally, segregation and urban diversity have been examined with the residential perspective, that is using official statistics that describe the populations, but geographically they are kind of linked to the residential neighborhoods, the homes where people live. And as we all kind of are illustrating today, we are not always at home. We are mobile. Essentially, most people are only at home when they're asleep. And this dynamic perspective towards segregation and urban diversity then kind of recognizes that it changes as a result from our daily mobility and activities that we're kind of doing during our lives, and is also concerned about identifying then kind of the places and times where different social groups encounter each other, and whether there's interaction, and whether that interaction is positive or negative or whatever it might be. And in order to study all of this, it's crucial to have mobile big data. So whether that's like the cell phone positioning data from mobile phone operators, or then this social media data there where we kind of voluntarily post about our lives, and that information can then be used to study the dynamic presence of people in urban areas. And kind of then jumping off from here, so my colleague Dr. Kerli Myyrisep has kind of or was very interested, and potentially still is, in kind of understanding this dynamic perspective of segregation. And here she studied the dynamic segregation in the Helsinki metropolitan area, and she found, using mobile phone presence data, and she found that on average people are less segregated during the daytime, and this is especially true on the weekends. So kind of this kind of the perspective on segregation that might be kind of visible from the traditional perspective doesn't really hold true as much during everyday travel. However, still, people from more disadvantaged neighborhoods have a more isolated use of urban space. That is, they visit the city center less during the workday, and during the weekends they stay more likely at their home neighborhood. And then Kerli was also interested in understanding how the COVID-19 pandemic affected kind of these dynamics. And here she studied Stockholm, Sweden. And in that study she found that the places, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, that is, the places and neighborhoods essentially became more segregated initially, but this didn't hold. So the kind of the neighborhoods in a way bounced back quite quickly. However, in contrast to this, kind of the people and their kind of mobility, so there the situation was a bit different. So the people still preferred to staying in places with higher segregation because everybody was isolating themselves. And these are kind of two clear examples of how this dynamic perspective can provide something else that we cannot get from more traditional approaches. And then moving on to languages and back to Helsinki, so another example of the dynamic perspective's benefits is that, for instance, with the population registry data here, the diversity of languages appears to be very kind of concentrated in certain key neighborhoods, and also the registry data only covers one first language. And as we know, in a bilingual country, people speak more than one language. So here, the kind of content posted on social media can be then used to assess and identify kind of the languages people use, and as they post their posts wherever they might be, like in the airport or like on Suomenlinna Island or wherever they might be, they're choosing to use whatever language they know, so they're not limited to their home location or by kind of one official language that they happen to have in the registry. So clearly Helsinki metropolitan area from this perspective appears to be much more diverse than from the registry data perspective. And this is not to say that registry data is not important. It is highly crucial. It often kind of provides the kind of this robust background against which these big data observations can be then reliably compared to. And this is a lot kind of more time series analysis from 1987 until 2019 about linguistic diversity in the Helsinki metropolitan area. And here you can see on the bottom row, so in 1987, the kind of statistically significant hotspots of linguistic diversity, they essentially existed in areas with a lot of Swedish-speaking Finns and in the southern peninsula of Helsinki, where there's a lot of foreign embassies. So those were the kind of hotspots of linguistic diversity. But already in 2003, you can see that this kind of spatial pattern is starting to splinter. So suburban areas in eastern Helsinki and in central Espoo are kind of getting this statistical significance, and then kind of illustrating the current status quo. The originally present and highly significant linguistic diversity hotspots have completely disappeared in the last image here, showcasing that linguistic diversity, or like as one would say, okay, Swedish speakers do not matter anymore, or the foreign embassies do not matter, but like at least from this linguistic perspective, these are the areas now with the highest linguistic diversity. And what could be then the takeaway messages here? Well, essentially there's a massive need to understand these dynamics in urban fabric and how people are exposed to diversity and segregation, and improving this understanding is crucial. And recognizing that segregation is also produced across people's activity locations and mobility, and it gets reproduced also through that. So that means that tackling segregation or understanding urban diversities in cities needs these kind of more broader knowledge about the phenomena, and this can be gotten from mobile big data, and these are very crucial data sources to analyze this dynamic perspective. However, the registry data is still highly relevant and should be kind of consistently be there to compare against. And for the field to progress, especially in terms of segregation and urban diversity studies, we need much more cross-disciplinarity and combining quantitative but also qualitative approaches, as like whether like numerically some area might appear to be highly diverse and so on, but with qualitative approaches we can then kind of gain an understanding of like how it actually feels to the people and how it appears. And that is my presentation. Thank you all, and I'm ready for questions.